Chapter 15. Clues. The door of Randolph's and Bethany's room was kicked open with a loud bang. A furious Bethany stormed in and went straight to the walk-in closet. She pulled out her weapon bag and opened it harshly. After checking everything was in place, she zipped it back closed and pulled out another bag and started stuffing her clothes in.
Bethany!
Randolph's worried voice called out, but she ignored him as she continued to stuff her clothes. The face of that vampire flashed across her mind, smirking like he had won. Bethany gritted her teeth, her fists clenched. She looked up at the mirror in front of her, her indigo eyes staring back. Then it changed to the face of the smirking bloodsucker. Bethany snarled and grabbed the nearest thing she could reach and threw it at the mirror with so much force it shattered. She buried her face into her hand, ignoring the nearing footsteps. Randolph walked in and took in the broken mirror, her half-packed bags, and the state she was in. His eyes softened.
Bethany.
He called out softly. Bethany growled. What? She turned around and glared at Randolph's worried face. Bethany looked away and glared at the ground instead.
Bethany, what are you doing?
Randolph asked softly. Bethany huffed as she turned back to her bag and continued stuffing her clothes angrily. What else? I'm packing.
Bethany, you have to calm down. Tell me what's wrong. Let me help.
Randolph said softly as he approached her slowly. Bethany snarled as she threw the bag she was stuffing her clothes in away. You want to know what's wrong? Bethany stood up and stood face to Randolph. Bethany glared as she bit out. Our uncle, the uncle who brought Sebastian and I up when our parents died, is in those filthy bloodsuckers' hands. What are they gonna do to him there, I don't know. Probably fucking torture him, that's what. Bethany turned away and combed her hair back frustratingly. Randolph turned her around with his hands on her shoulder.
Bethany, listen to me. We'll find him. I promise I'll help, but it's late right now. Rest for the night and we'll go and find him tomorrow, alright?
Randolph reasoned.
Your uncle's a strong man, considering he brought you and Sebastian up.
Bethany snorted. Randolph smiled and hugged her. He rubbed her back reassuring and pulled her out of the closet. Bethany sighed, then she yelped when Randolph picked her up bridal style and placed her gently on the bed. He climbed onto the bed and threw the blanket around both of them. Bethany unconsciously snuggled closer to him when he pulled him into his arms. Bethany soothed out her breathing and fell asleep. Randolph smiled. He kissed her forehead, and he too was out. After an hour, Bethany's eyes fluttered open. She listened to Randolph's breathing, then she reached out a hand from the blanket and waved it in front of his face. When she received no reaction, she slowly detached herself from his arms and replaced it with a pillow. She got up slowly and was off the bed silently. Bethany watched as Randolph snuggled into the pillow that still has her scent, and smiled sadly. She bent over and kissed his forehead like how he did just an hour ago, and left the closet. She changed out of her comfortable clothes into something tight-fitting and flexible. She decided to forego the clothes in her weapon bag and took a few of her favorite weapons and hid them in different parts of her clothes. She closed the closet door silently after her, and took one last look of the peaceful sleeping form of Randolph. I'll come back after I check Harry's house for clues. He won't even realize I'm gone. Bethany nodded to herself before she opened the window and jumped out. When her feet landed gracefully on the moist ground, she dashed into the woods, and she was gone. Randolph sighed and sat up slowly. He looked at the open window with a sad smile.
You wouldn't be, Bethany, if you do what I told you.
He whispered and sighed. Then he heard his bedroom door open to reveal Ramona standing there. She looked at the opened window, then back at him with an amused look. Bethany left too, didn't she? Ramona asked.
Yeah, kinda expected it.
They shared a laugh before heading back to sleep, only a thought in both mind.
Return to us safely.
Bethany dashed past trees as fast as she could without stopping. She saw the way out of the woods before she crashed into something, or should she say someone, and they tumbled around the grass. Ouch, watch where you're going, Pinhead! Bethany groaned out while laying flat on the cold ground.
Why don't you watch where you're going, you ding-dong?
A familiar voice argued back. There was a pregnant silence before they spoke at the same time.
Bethany?
Sebastian? They both sat up straight and pointed at each other. What are you doing here?
Why are you doing here?
Then they spoke at the same time.
Saving Uncle, of course.
They glared at each other. Stop copying me!
Stop copying me!
They growled and charged at each other. They tumbled around the grass before Bethany stood up. Okay, stop. This is going nowhere. Sebastian, too, stood up.
Agreed.
They dusted the leaves that stuck to their clothes and walked out of the woods silently. Now they were before an open road with no cars, and their old house were hours away. They groaned when they realized that. Both of them were in their own world thinking of a plan before Sebastian started ranting.
I got nothing. How in the world are we going to reach our old house, find some clues, and come back here without anybody knowing with a limited time of...
He looked at his watch.
7 hours and come back without our mates knowing we're gone.
Dude, chill. We'll figure something out. Maybe, Bethany mumbled.
Huh. Maybe she says.
Sebastian mumbled. Bethany rolled her eyes before she began thinking. Yoo-hoo, sweetheart, have you forgotten about me? Charlotte sing-song in her head. Her face brightened. Sebastian! She yelled as she was excited of her idea and had forgotten that Sebastian was right beside her.
Whoa, I'm right here, you know. I could turn deaf.
Sebastian whined as he rubbed his ears. That's not important right now. He gave her an incredulous look.
Not important. Not important.
Bethany sighed. Sebastian, listen. She started before Sebastian stopped her with his index finger pointed at her face. Her eyes crossed to look at the opposing finger.
Oh no, you listen to me. I could have been deaf and you said it wasn't important. I'm your twin. We share the same womb.
Bethany got fed up and grabbed his shoulders. Sebastian!
What?
Are you done?
Yes, why are we shouting?
I don't... Bethany deep breath. I don't know. Anyways, are you going to listen to me now? I said with an eyebrow raised.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So, about the whole reaching our old house, find every shit we need to find before coming back here in record time stuff, I have a plan. We could just use our abilities.
Okay. What abilities?
Sebastian asked, confused. Bethany pinched the bridge of her nose and sighed. Sebastian, dear, think before I stab you. Sebastian looked lost before his left eye twitched.
Well, I know what our abilities are now.
He said with a deadpan face. Got told off by Charles, didn't ya? Bethany said with a smirk. He didn't reply to her and just walked away, flipping his imaginary long hair over his shoulder. Bethany caught up to him later, but not before laughing her ass off first. They both went behind a tree each and took off our clothes before shifting into their wolf form. Bethany shook her fur and stretched her paw. Then Sebastian pawed her in the snout and ran away.
Alicia.
He sent her a mind link with a laugh. Bethany grinned. She bit onto her clothes with her mouth, gently but securely. You're so on. Loser buys breakfast. With that, she chased after him. You owe me breakfast, Bethany said with a grin when they reached the familiar neighborhood of their hometown, fully dressed. Beside her, Sebastian was grumbling. Aw, Sebby Webby said that he lost, Bethany cooed and squeezed his cheeks. Suddenly, Sebastian came to a halt. He was looking at something behind Bethany. She turned around and her eyes widened. Their house, their home where they grew up in, looked like it's about to fall apart any second, with police restriction tape circling it.
The hell?
Sebastian breathed out. They exchanged looks before walking up the porch, well, what's left of it. The front door was in splinters on the floor, like something barged in. Their pictures that decorated the walls was on the floor, shattered. We walked further in and our jaws tightened. The whole living room was trashed. Some parts of the wall were burned. The sofa was flipped over with slashed marks, windows in shards of glass, and most importantly, the bloods that stained the floor. Let's split up and check for clues, Bethany said, and Sebastian nodded. Bethany went to check the back rooms while Sebastian stayed and checked the living room. Sebastian walked carefully towards the bloodstain and noticed there was a trail of blood that continued up the stairs. He followed it and was led to a perfectly fine door. He looked around the hallway and saw most of the rooms were trashed and broken.
Weird. Everything is in ruins.
He mumbled. Then he turned back to the door in front of her that was perfectly fine and spotless. Not even a drop of blood was on it.
So why are you perfectly fine?
Sebastian touched the golden doorknob hesitatingly. He took a deep breath, then he twisted the doorknob and slowly pushed open the door. He cursed.
Bethany, I found something.
Sebastian yelled without looking away. He heard footsteps hurried up the stairs. What? Shit. The hell? Bethany breathed out. Sebastian pushed open the door wider and they were hit with a disgusting odor. Harry sure does know how to leave a surprise. Corpses were littered around the room. They were bent in different positions with bloods covering them, and there were flies surrounding them. But there was one other thing about them that made them different than normal corpses. They weren't humanoid. Well, they are, partially. Dark fur covered their whole body. They had weird, deformed, wolf-like heads with squashed snouts, sharp teeth, and beady eyes. Their ears were too big on their heads and were floppy. Lower than that, they had a human-like body, except they didn't have genitals. Their hands and feet were too big with sharp claws that looked like they can tear fleshes apart with just a swipe. They pulled out their weapons as they took a step closer to one of it. Bethany knelt down to take a closer look at it while trying to see if it's still alive. She poked at it with her blade.
What are they?
Sebastian spoke up beside her as he too inspected the corpse. Bethany furrowed her brows. I don't know, but they looked, like an experiment gone wrong. She waved over the deformed corpse they're inspecting. Let's check for more clues. They stood up and inspected the room for more clues, but the corpses were the only thing left from Harry. Let's take a pic. Maybe he knows something.
Yeah.
Sebastian agreed and pulled out his phone and took a pic. You done? Bethany asked.
Yep.
Sebastian replied as he pocketed his phone. Let's get out of here. We're running out of time. The pack's gonna wake up any minute now, Bethany said as she eyes the rising sun outside the window. Randolph and Ramona were waiting at the front door when Bethany and Sebastian shifted back. Bethany and Sebastian eyed each other when they saw their mates. Hey, Bethany said when they reached their mates. You knew when? Randolph grinned.
Since you left. Uh-huh. So, we're cool?
Sebastian asked as they looked at their mates guiltily. Randolph and Ramona hugged their mates. You two wouldn't have been our Bethany and Sebastian if you don't do things your own ways. Bethany and Sebastian grinned and hugged them back, happy that they have such considerate mates. Bethany and Sebastian then pulled their mates into the house quickly when they remembered their founding. Whoa, why the rush? Ramona asked, clearly curious about the way their mates was behaving. It's very important. We found something, Bethany said, and Sebastian pulled his phone from his pocket. He showed them the picture they had taken. Randolph cursed. What are they? Ramona asked. We don't know. We're planning to ask our... Bethany said before she was cut off by Alex rushing in.
Alpha, there's an intruder. Who? We don't know. He didn't tell us his name. All he said was that he was looking for his cousins.
Randolph saw Alex wanted to say something else as he kept on fidgeting and biting his lips.
Was there something else?
Randolph asked. Alex looked up and sighed.
The other didn't realize, but that boy, he smelled weird.
Weird? Bethany asked and exchanged a look with Sebastian. Define weird. Alex thought for a moment.
I don't know how to explain it, but, he smelled like a werewolf, but it was tainted. No, not tainted, but like mixed with another smell. It was very weird.
Both Bethany and Sebastian looked at each other before running out of the house.
Wait.
Randolph yelled after them. Why do they keep running? Ramona complained as they chased after their mates. When they arrived, they saw their mates hugging a boy happily.
That's him, the intruder.
Alex supplied beside Randolph. They broke apart and Bethany smacked his head. Bethany glared at the boy as she crossed her arms. Did you know?
But what?
The boy said, his British accent thick. The werewolf stuff. The boy looked sheepish as he realized what Bethany was talking about.
Yeah.
Sebastian frowned.
Why didn't you and Harry tell us? I'll explain it to you later, but I got some things to tell you first, like super important things. Guys, who is he?
Randolph asked, cutting off their conversation. They turned to him and both Bethany and Sebastian grinned.
This is our cousin.
Sebastian wrapped his arm around the boy's shoulder.
Joseph Lloyd.
And he's going to help us with the case, Bethany continued as he ruffled his hair. How could he help us? Ramona asked, bemused. Easy. Who else knows more about the vampire's plans than the one who has been undercovering under their nose for over a year? Joseph grinned. He pointed his thumbs at himself.
This guy.